It's about... Wow, there's nothing back there. What was that? That was an interesting start. I don't know if you heard that. So anyways, recently a gentleman made a comment on one of my videos, and I'd asked him if he made a comment about some experiences he's had. So I asked him if he wanted to share them. I don't know if you heard that. It was a double bark. That might have been Fisher. Something back there. I've been doing this work for over a dozen years now, and I've been blessed with extreme amount of contact experience in that time. Thanks to all those who have been involved that have helped me get through all that. So anyways, I want to try something different. Something different with my channel here. Just doing my part to help bring this truth to the forefront. While the powers that be they can't hide the fact that Sasquatch do exist. They can manipulate and through whatever means they do to keep us, keep the masses from learning a bigger truth about them. These are ancient interdimensional people with abilities that basically they change our understanding of reality. So I had a gentleman post recently on my channel, post a comment, and I'd asked him, if you want to expand on that and share your experiences. So he did, and he sent a couple of experiences into me that he had over the years. It dates way back, this first one, all the way back to 1974, I think it is. The other one from 83, which I'll tell after this first one. And I'm just going to share what he's written verbatim. And he's a retired Oregon forest ranger. So anyways, I'm just going to get right into this. There's a lot of high strangeness that comes with close Sasquatch presence. And there's a lot of people that have experienced it, and the numbers of sightings at this point are in the tens of thousands. So while a lot of people are still thinking it's just some ape, no, it's not just some ape. It's something that is far beyond anything else that we understand. So anyways. All right. So it happened in October of 1974 in the Cascade Mountains just west of Bend, Oregon. I had been deer hunting in the area above and around Tomalo Falls at the base of Broken Top Mountain. I had just turned 18, had enlisted in the Delayed Enlistment Program in the United States Coast Guard, and was waiting for boot camp to begin the following spring. I had hunted that area only a few times before, but I had jumped a huge mule deer buck the day before and was anxious to get out of class early that October afternoon and return to the area, anticipating harvesting a mature granddaddy buck. With a 30-30 Model 94 Winchester, extra shells, sandwiches, potato chips, and a couple cans of Pepsi in the military-grade rucksack my dad had picked up at a military surplus supply, I was off. The drive time it took from our home in Bend to the area I was going to hunt flew by, and I distinctly remember thinking how strange it was that it went by so fast. I reasoned that I must have been excited, thereby paying little to no attention to the drive at all. Eventually, I didn't give it a second thought. I knew exactly where I wanted to go. There was a huge ponderosa pine tree that was actually two trees joined at the base, forming a perfect seat facing Tomalo Creek, just 15 feet in front of me, with a clear view of the bank on the other side. I took off the pack, sat down and nestled myself in this tree crotch with my rifle laying across my lap, pack full of goodies to my right of my right leg, at about my right knee area and waited. I remember being overtaken with the feeling that I was being watched. The woods went completely quiet, and to this day I can't remember hearing the creek, which was right in front of me. Not a bird, squirrel, the sound of the creek, nothing, dead silent. Then for some unknown reason, there was a high-pitched ringing in my ears, and I was overcome with a deep longing to sleep. I told myself that this was the perfect setting to take a nap in, but that I wasn't there to take a nap. I was there to still hunt and bag this monster of a buck. Despite pitiful efforts to resist, I fell asleep deeply and soundly. To this day, I believe it was my sixth sense waking me up. I remember briefly not knowing where I was. The sun had obviously gone down behind Broken Top. However, it was still pretty light. I sat quietly for a moment, reorienting myself with my surroundings. That's when I noticed the absolute massive mule deer doe standing just feet away from my left knee. When I looked up, she was looking right at me. We made eye contact, but neither of us moved. We just stared at each other for what seemed like an eternity. Suddenly, my mind was filled with the words, "I'm not here to harm you, Daniel." I was overcome with emotion when I heard my name in my head and realized it wasn't my thoughts. I had such a deep and profound sense of well-being and peace that my mind thought what seemed almost intuitive to the phrase, "I'm not here to harm you either." With that single communication, that single interaction, the deer stepped around my feet and walked off to my right. I remember watching her as she gracefully walked away, disappearing into the tree line. I sat there completely dumbfounded by what had just happened. Then when I looked up directly in front of my feet, there was a ball of light. Magenta in color, fading in and out of view. Slowly it drifted down to the creek, crossed the creek, and faded into the tree line on the opposite bank. Orb activity is part of the high strangeness that comes with close Sasquatch presence. I've witnessed it both indoors and out in real time with witnesses. I heard the words again, "I'm not here to harm you, Daniel." I thought the words, "I'm not here to harm you either," and she was gone. I just sat there and was actually shocked by the fact that I could feel tears streaming down my cheeks. I wasn't afraid. I had no thoughts of fear or thinking that I need to get the hell out of here. Nothing but peace. It was then that I looked at my watch and was astounded to realize that I had slept for more than 2 hours. I remember thinking of everyone that I was going to tell this story to, but the words, "Tell no one, it's not time," flooded my mind. Who's this talking to me? I gathered up my pack and my rifle, which I unloaded, and walked back to my dad's truck. Once inside, I just sat there trying to make sense out of what just happened. The drive home went by in a flash, and I was shocked to find myself sitting in the driveway of our home in Bend. What had happened to that time? Why couldn't I remember the drive to or from my encounter? I'm familiar with that too. When my dad asked me if I saw anything, I said, "No, not a thing." I think I remember him saying something to the effect, "He's still up there." I didn't respond as I walked to the kitchen, unloaded my rucksack, my mom being surprised that I hadn't touched my sandwiches, opened the bag of chips, nor pulled the tab and popped the top on one of the cans of Pepsi. How in the world am I going to tell a story like that to my dad? He was sure to have me committed as certifiably wacko. Yeah, I'm familiar with that too. Yeah. I walked upstairs to my brother and I's bedroom and sat there on the bed, replaying what had happened in my mind over and over again. I've had many encounters with these beings over the years. That was just the first. As a retired Oregon State Park ranger that has spent thousands of hours in forests and wilderness, I considered it a privilege that these beings would let me know of their presence. I've always kept it to myself, never disclosing when or where I have sensed them. I'm 65 years old, do not hunt anymore or spend time in the wilderness like I once did. I've had 3 total hip replacements and 9 major back surgeries as a result of being in a terrible accident at the age of 15. So my stomping around out there is a thing of the past. I miss them, I miss it, and I miss them. I can't stop the tears from filling my eyes as I write this. I've never forgotten it, not even a little. I haven't forgotten any of the encounters I've had with these forest people. When I saw your videos, listened to your stories, and heard the vocalizations, I knew I had found a safe harbor. Tell me I'm not crazy, Mike. You're not crazy, Daniel. Neither am I. I've carried this stuff around for a long time, bottled up inside, for fear of the slander, smear campaigns, ridicule, and mocking. Even from close friends, or at least from those I thought were close friends, I've said nothing. Needless to say, I no longer associate with any of them upon discovering their narcissistic agendas and inauthentic natures as human beings. Their agenda is deception. I keep pretty much to myself, waiting for my wife to retire so we can get the hell out of Portland, Oregon. One of my encounters took place with a cousin while archery / elk hunting in eastern Oregon, just outside of La Grande, Oregon. This guy is a seasoned outdoorsman, archery hunter, upland bird hunter, you name it. He hunts it. He lives, eats, drinks, and breathes hunting, and he doesn't want to hear about any of it. Is it possible that these beings are able to sense who they can reveal themselves to? And thank you, Mike, for encouraging me to share my story with you. I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. What I experienced that day has left me shaking my head for 47 years, and sharing it here with you today opens up a floodgate of emotions and memories I thought were long forgotten. Again, a sincere thank you. I can understand the emotions that this brings up. When you have an encounter with the Sasquatch, especially one that's very close and personal, it changes your understanding of what you thought was real, and especially witnessing events with the high strangeness, it basically shatters your understanding of reality. So I'm going to share this second encounter incident that Daniel shared with me, and it's even more interesting. So listen to this one. Okay, I had to go in the house there and charge up my battery. Phone died on me. So I had this, as I mentioned, this gentleman from Oregon, retired forest ranger, and this is his second story that he shared with me. So I'm going to read this again verbatim. Greetings, Mike. Here is my second encounter. Honestly, I'm sitting here shaking my head in amazement that I can remember all the details so clearly. These experiences have definitely stayed with me. Thank you for encouraging me to write these out. I don't mean to sound like I'm some kind of wacko in need of therapy, but getting these down in writing is really therapeutic. I can completely understand. When you run into this, experience this sort of thing, it just shatters your whole perspective on everything you were told is, you're told that these things don't exist, but they do. Sorry, I don't mean to say things. These ancient people, this species of ancient people, very highly evolved. So my third encounter isn't nearly as exciting, and only involves small rocks being thrown at me while I was alone as an Oregon State Park Ranger assigned to take care of and maintain Dead Man's Pass rest area at the top of Cabbage Hill in the Blue Mountains between Pendleton and La Grande in northeastern Oregon. It's where the Oregon Trail comes out of the mountains and down to what would eventually become the town of Pendleton. I was stationed there for 4 years and never put two and two together about who or what was throwing rocks at me while I was alone in the rest area, and I was alone all the time. The retelling of this experience may take some time. The reason for this is due to what I refer to as the telling of less significant events that took place prior to the actual encounter. I classify them this way because at the time I had absolutely no idea they would form the foundation and ultimately frame what happened that day. There's a raven. I love that sound. Looking back on the experience now, I realize that each individual event fit like pieces of a puzzle, and when the puzzle was complete, the picture became much more clear. Cool. It was 1983, and the second rifle/elk season was about to begin. The Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife decided to split one long 2-week hunting season into 2 shorter seasons with a week-long break between them in hopes of minimizing the fire danger that often accompanied a dry eastern Oregon fall, and to reduce the pressure imposed upon game animals that have been hunted heavily. I think that there was also the thought that if they could cut back on the number of hunters in the woods, it would substantially reduce the fire danger and the threat of campfires that got out of control due to any number of reasons: inexperienced, intoxicated hunters, and careless shenanigans that often went with the territory and the excitement of camping, and ultimately the hunt. I had purchased 2 tags, one for myself and the other for the pastor of a local Pentecostal church. From now on, I will refer to him as Pastor. I had spent several weeks conducting gun safety classes for him prior to our hunt, and was convinced that he possessed the intelligence required to carry a high-powered firearm into the wilderness. He felt comfortable handling the rifle, and after shooting a few hundred rounds target practicing, he was confident with his .308 Marlin lever action and a 4-power scope. The area we intended to hunt was in the Blue Mountains of eastern Oregon. For obvious reasons, I'll decline to give exact location, despite the fact that many years have passed since then. As far as I know, the area is still intact and as pristine as it was then. One can only hope. I still remember my co-workers' raised eyebrows and precautionary comments when I shared with them that where we were going. Comments like, keep your eyes open, pay attention, and some weird shit has happened up there. Danny, be careful. Hung heavily in the air along with the occasional shaking of someone's head, followed by the hushed comments like, I can't believe you're going up there. When I asked what the big deal was about this specific area, the answers were less encouraging. You'll see. Hopefully you'll be okay. Little did I know what I was getting myself into. Pastor and I got up very early opening morning and drove the 45 minutes or so to our spot. We sat in the car drinking coffee, waiting for it to be legally light enough to hunt. As we sat there, it had begun to snow lightly. The flakes were the small ones that often accompany temperatures well below freezing. We grabbed our gear and headed out. The unit was a small box canyon with a small yet wide creek meandering through the bottom. In some places, a good jump would get you across the other side. Other spots took careful planning, or in the water you went. We studied the creek, looking for a place to cross. Other places you would have to rock hop to get across. We decided Pastor would cross the creek and we would slowly walk up the canyon, keeping each other in sight about 50 yards apart. Both of us looked at each other with weird expressions on our faces. Something was off about this place. What it was, we weren't exactly sure. We ignored it and pushed on. That feeling never left us. What happened next was unexplainable. We came upon a root ball of a large fir tree that looked as if it were placed in a clearing, and it was burning. I say placed because there were no indications on the ground that it was dragged there. There were no signs of heavy equipment from a previous logging operation in the area. It was as if something carried it there and then just dropped it in its place. The clearing was about 50 or so yards in diameter, with no other trees in the clearing at all. We stood there looking at it and back at each other with that quizzical look on our faces as if to say, where did this come from? And why is it on fire? Since there were no footprints, no trackway, nothing that would indicate other hunters in this area And to further substantiate this, there were no tracks, cars, or footprints in the newly fallen snow. We certainly didn't see any other vehicles where we parked. In fact, it looked as though we made the first tracks on the Forest Service Road. There were literally no other hunters in this unit. We stood there pondering the burning root wad. The pastor made his way back across the creek, and we continued our hunt. When I first read this, the first thing that came to my mind was the biblical burning bush and Sasquatch humor. They show a lot of humor, and I wondered if that's what that was referring to, because they would have known that this pastor was a religious guy. We decided we would take about 50 paces, stop for about 5 minutes, look, listen, and wait, and then start out counting 50 more paces. We did this for about 2 hours. It began snowing harder, and I could tell the temperature was dropping since the flakes were small. The snow falling made it difficult to see any distance at all. Then I heard Pastor whistle just one quick note. I stopped and looked across the creek at him, motioning for me to come over to him. I slowly walked down to the creek and found a place to cross and walked the 30 or so yards up the bank to where he was standing. That was when the hair on the back of my neck stood straight up and turned into wire. I had that feeling I was being watched. When I got to the pastor, his eyes were as wide as saucers. When he asked me, "Do you feel that?" the expression on his face had a serious and almost angry appearance to it. I said, like we're being watched? All he said was yes, and didn't utter another word. Remember, this is the pastor of a Pentecostal church, and they are not known for being superstitious or spooked by anything. His trust was in God and God alone. Humans and all good people of churchianity were at the top of the food chain in their minds. No questions asked. I remember feeling even more uneasy to see what I perceived was fear in his eyes. No way, not this Eastern Oregon preacher. He was pointing up the hill, across the creek to close to where I was. I noticed he was straining to see through the fine flakes of heavy snowfall. I looked at him and then back in the direction he was straining to see, and then back at him when he said, "Holy crap, what is that? What's a football player doing out here in the middle of the forest?" As I was straining to look in the direction he was looking, I saw it. Straining to see through the snowfall, I could see a huge figure about 30 yards away, under a large tree. It did look like a football player in full uniform, but it was bigger, much bigger. It was huge. I estimate that it weighed on upwards of 750 to 900 pounds and was at least 11 to 12 feet tall. Its shoulders were easily 4.5 to 5 feet wide, no neck. One arm was raised above its head, as if it were a person waving at us. Then I realized it was holding onto a branch of the tree it was standing under. There was no smell or stench that many others had testified that they witnessed when encountering one of these beings. The forest was so quiet you could actually hear the snowflakes landing on the brim of your hat. Perfectly quiet, still, no breeze. The snow was falling straight down. The only sound was the snowflakes quietly landing. Then the pastor said it. Words I thought I would never hear come out of the mouth of a deeply religious person. "What the hell is that?" Just as the words were leaving his mouth, the creature brought down his arm from the branch he was holding on to, turned, and with 2 huge steps, vanished into the woods. What was weird about the way we lost sight of him wasn't that the forest enveloped him and he disappeared into the deep brush. He literally vanished before entering the tree line. The entire encounter lasted perhaps a minute and a half. We just stood there in complete silence, mouths wide open like a couple of mouth breathers, astonished by what we had just seen, tears streaming down both our faces. Don't ask me to explain the inadvertent, spontaneous weeping. I'm not able. We stood there staring at where he had stood for another 10 minutes, not speaking, not moving, nothing. It was as if our feet were glued to the forest floor. Just then the pastor said, "We need to leave now." I had never heard him utter such stern words before and agreed that it was probably time to go. Why I wasn't entirely sure. Why, I wasn't entirely sure. We hadn't been threatened in any way whatsoever. However, the feeling of being watched never left us. As we both crossed back over the creek to where I was when Pastor motioned me to come over to him, he turned and walked up the hill toward the tree it stood under. I remember asking him what he was doing, and he told me he wanted to see where it stood and to see if there were any footprints. I remember thinking, this is crazy shit right here, but said nothing. As we approached the tree, we could easily determine the diameter at breast height of the tree to be at least 6 feet around easy. You could wrap your arms around the tree and not touch your fingertips. The branch that it was holding onto was at least 14 feet off the ground or thereabouts. The canopy prevented the snow from accumulating under the tree, so there were no footprints, nor were there prints at the edge of the tree line where it had entered the brush/forest. Keep in mind, we had walked for about 4 hours away from where we had parked the car, but were astounded when we got back to the car in less than 15 minutes. The entire way feeling as though we were still being watched. We didn't speak the entire drive home. Personally, I don't know what to say, and for the pastor of a church to be speechless, well, that right there is a rare and unusual occurrence. It has been over 30 years since I left beautiful Eastern Oregon. I've had one telephone conversation with Pastor during that time. He did not want to discuss that elk hunting experience, not one word of it. I never fully understood why certain people refused to discuss strange occurrences like this in the woods. I find them fascinating. That was the second encounter I've had in my life. Unbeknownst to me, it wouldn't be my last. And do these beings have the ability to pick and choose who they reveal themselves to? Are they able to vanish into thin air? How can something that big be so quiet? These are questions I've had since my first encounter. Why are our governments lying to us about their existence? I know I don't have the answers to these questions. I just know what I saw and what I experienced. Fascinating stuff. I find it interesting, too. He witnessed one disappear into thin air before it hit the tree line, and still he's asking the question, can they disappear into thin air? Yes, they can. They can disappear and materialize. Sasquatch are masters of energy, and there's more and more people encountering this stuff, and I really appreciate that Daniel sent this in to me and allowed me to share his experience. So I would like to continue that and keep doing this. So if there's anybody out there who's had similar experiences, benevolent, I know there's two sides to this thing. I don't want to get into the I don't ignore it. I don't ignore that people have aggressive encounters, that sort of thing. I don't know of anybody getting killed. Being scared off and killed is two different things. Being scared off and fearing and judging them as malevolent creatures when you went home and got to sleep in your bed that night, they could have easily torn you in two, basically. So I'm looking for people that want to share their benevolent experiences, especially, as I mentioned before, with the high strangeness, anything mind speak or witnessing materialization or disappearing into thin air, just all the high strange stuff. Some folks have healing done from them. So anybody out there who's open enough to allow me to share your experiences, contact me please at sasquatchontario@yahoo.ca, not .com, .ca, and reach out to me, and I'll be glad to share your experiences. I know those who do experience this stuff, as myself, especially when you've held on to it for so long, you're afraid to open up about it to people because of the ridicule factor. I've been there. I go through it all the time. At this point, I don't care what people think. I know I stand in my truth, and I know what's going on to a certain extent anyways. I've been blessed with probably well over 1,000 encounter experiences at this point. And it's a very slow process of contact. They're always in control of everything. All we can do basically is show up. But if you would like to share your stories, please, again, reach out to me, sasquatchontario@yahoo.ca, and I would love to hear from you. Thank you very much.